This is Radio Access 102.5, where local voices matter. All right, everybody, welcome to 701 Civics, where we explore people, ideas, and institutions that shape civic life in North Dakota and around the country. I'm your host, and today we're going to talk about one of the biggest challenges perhaps facing democracy in the digital age is how technology is changing the way we access information, engage with one another, and participate in public life, particularly with those who represent us. Joining us is Ramon Perez, the Executive Director of the Digital Democracy Project. We'll discuss a little bit of his background, the organization's mission to strengthen civic engagement, promote digital literacy, and help citizens navigate that increasingly complex online world. Ramon, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, Brian, thank you so much for having us on.
Yeah, I'm excited. Again, when I first was introduced to this, I was very curious because technology is making the news in all kinds of ways. It's nice to hear it in what I think could be a very positive way.
Yeah, I was going to say, usually for negative reasons.
Yeah, exactly. So
we'd like to be an antidote to that.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Tell us just the elevator pitch of what the Digital Democracy Project is, and then we'll jump a little bit into your background and kind of how that got off the ground.
Yeah, for sure. So the Digital Democracy Project is a nonprofit organization, but we're using mobile voting software, which lets you vote by your phone in real elections. Only we're not a supervisor of elections. We are loading legislation that's being debated in Congress into this mobile voting software and letting people weigh in on bills as they're being debated ahead of a floor vote in the full Congress. And we use the same protocol. We verify people by their citizenship. They have to be U.S. citizens. They have to be real human beings. We verify them against the voter file, against a selfie scan that matches a photo ID, passport, or a driver's license. So just like if you were voting in a real election, and this software, we partnered with Votes, which is spelled VOATZ. They have carried out 150 different certified elections in several states now, as well as in Mexico and Canada. They predominantly built this software for military voters overseas to vote by phone in places where it's really tough to get an absentee ballot through the mail. So imagine being in a submarine under the water for 6 months. It's tough to vote in an election. I was a military officer myself, and I've been deployed in more than one election. So I completely understood what the use case that they built for. When I got introduced to them, I said, man, if you can do all this, and you've got, all this cryptographic security, this whole blockchain backend, you've got all this sort of sophisticated two-factor authentication and a device level authentication, all this kind of stuff, then why should we have to wait every couple of years to have a say in our government? Why shouldn't we be able to create government on demand, like a Netflix for government? And so that's what we set out to do. We started building in 2022. We did our first live legislative session with the Florida legislature in 2023 because it's shorter, 60 days. So it's a little bit more manageable. But we have a legislative team that tracks which bills are moving through the legislature to figure out what's getting committee assignments, what's likely to make it to the floor, what's got momentum, basically, so that voters can have a say on these active bills before they make it to the full floor for an up or down vote. So voters who are verified now against the voter file and against those ID verifications weigh in advance of a vote, and then legislators can see what their districts want before they take that tough vote in the chambers. So we started with the state of Florida. We've expanded to the U.S. government, U.S. Congress. So now all Americans in all 50 states can have a say on federal bills. And we've expanded to an additional 6 states. So that's Arizona, Washington, Michigan, Massachusetts, Utah, Virginia, so that people can weigh in on state level legislation. And our goal is to be in all 50 states so people can weigh in on state level legislation in addition to federal.
Gotcha. All right. So that's the elevator pitch. So give us a little bit of your background and how you got involved in this. What's the impetus for that other than, again, involvement? What was that moment like for you?
Yeah, I was a military officer for about 13 years, and I got involved in technology after leaving active duty. Spent the last 12 years in AI and machine learning and technology consulting. And I think for me, it was probably period of COVID, Black Lives Matter, January 6th, sort of the sense that, actually I visited Portland shortly after in 2021 as well. So there's kind of a combination of seeing the effects of January 6th on our capital. If you recall, there was also an attempt on Governor Whitmer's life, I think in Michigan as well, that was pretty well advanced. Assassination attempt. There was the Black Lives Matter riots where the city essentially abandoned, the city government basically abandoned the city to what you might effectively call an anarchist group. And it started to feel like, we'd spent the last 20 years trying to build democracies in Iraq and Afghanistan. And here we are watching it fall apart right at home. And I had, I had been deployed multiple times in the military. I had lost, friends. And to me, it felt like we had almost, it hurt to feel like their sacrifice, was being wasted
Right.
because we took our eye off the ball here at home. And so I wanted to see what could I personally bring to the table. And because I've been working in technology, I got introduced to a lot of people in the technology space. And that's why, I got connected to the CEO of Votes and really got to learn about what I believe is disruptive technology can do for putting power directly into the hands of voters in a way that solves a lot of the underlying problems that lead to a January 6th in the first place, or the riots in Portland and other things. If people feel disconnected, they feel like they're not being listened to. That's not even a right or left thing. It's like you push people to extremes if they feel like the legitimate process has been basically rigged. And if you look at our system where we've gerrymandered all the districts so that legislative seats are not even really competitive anymore. By the time the November election rolls around, it's already been decided by the Democrats or the Republicans, more or less carving up safe districts for themselves and only competing over between 5 and 8% of the total legislative districts. In my home state of Florida, something like 70% of districts go unchallenged by the other party because they just don't waste their time. And most of the decisions are made in the primaries. Almost all decisions are made in the primaries. And so you end up with an extremely vocal, very right or very left-leaning group of voters who represent about 8 to 10% of voters who actually get to determine what happens in Congress. And I think that's why we end up with this extreme tribalism and hyperpartisanship that really feels like it's tearing the country apart a lot of times. And so the question is, how do you deal with that systematic shortcoming in our election system? And what we're hoping to do is use technology in a way that can match the original, stakeholders in our democracy, which is that our representatives are meant to represent a group of people, right? Their community. And yet there's all these middlemen that now stand between us and our representative because of the system of elections and campaign financing and the party selection process and the primaries and the lobbying groups and the billionaire donor class, and you can name all sorts of reasons, but there's a lot of people that stand between us and our representative. And we believe that this technology has the capacity to short circuit all of that process and put us directly back in touch with the people we sent to Washington on our behalf.
So is this your brainchild, your baby, or did you have a team of people that you were working with right away?
So I think we always stand on the shoulders of giants. I think that, we can see prototypes of this in various places over the course of time. In fact, I think Ross Perot talked about this in the 1990s when he was running as an independent for president. It's just that the technology didn't exist at the time. But there has always been an interest in trying to do more participatory democracy or direct democracy, or however you want to call it, where people have a direct say in the process. Now, and people will come to me and say, "Oh yeah, but I can always call my congressman or write him a letter," right? But the challenge is that that's a one-way valve, right? You can send data in, but they have no obligation to use that information. In fact, Interestingly, Congress is not even obligated to report that information under a Freedom of Information filing. They
Mhm.
exempt themselves from a FOIA request. So you have no way to know how many people called into the congressman's office, and if 90% were for and 10% were against, or if it was 51-49, you have no concept. There's no transparency there. And so what we're trying to do is provide a system of transparency where everybody can see how everybody, it's a secret ballot, so it's aggregated, right? So everybody in a district can see how everybody in that district voted on any given bill. And the legislators can see it, the journalists can see it, the voters can see it, the other nonprofits. It's publicly available. So transparency is a key concept that can make this work, but it also relies on verifying identity. So one of the reasons that legislators don't really pay attention to their emails is because they don't trust them. I've spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill, either DC or Tallahassee, and you see the volume of emails that they get is crazy. I mean, the
Mhm.
Speaker of the House in Florida gets about 1,200 emails a day,
Mhm.
and most of these are form filled emails, and increasingly now they're becoming AI generated emails, and so they can't trust the veracity of the email itself. They can't even necessarily trust that the person who calls in is actually in their district,
Mhm.
and or if that's even now a deep fake. So they just mostly it goes to spam,
Mhm.
and they lean on what they know, which is there's a small group of people who are going to vote in a primary. If I cater to them, I can keep my job. That's basically it. So we got to find a mechanism where we can provide the legislator with what they need, which is that confidence that these are real people in their district and they're real voters who can have a real impact in a real election, right? That's
Mhm.
the accountability piece. But we also need to provide voters with what they need, which is a say in the process that's real, it's got teeth, and a way of holding legislators accountable to the results, which is our scorecards. So what we do is we measure what do the people want in the app as a community. So a congressional district, a state house district, and then what did the legislator do during the session, and how often do they match, so
Mhm.
that every legislator gets a scorecard, just like a baseball card, except that our scorecards are not like the NRA or the Sierra Club or the Chamber of Commerce, where they have a political opinion. We're
Mhm.
measuring people against democracy. Are you accountable to your district, to the people who put you in office? Are you voting in line with your district? And if you're not, how often is that the case? And you tend to get a trend line over a couple hundred bills that we've carried, about 800, 900 bills now. You'll tend to get a trend line of how closely these folks match against their district. So that when
Right.
voters go to the polls, they've got a concrete number to look at. It's like looking at somebody's RBIs, you know,
Mhm.
or ERA or whatever. You get
Yeah.
real data over the course of time, and that tends to be more concrete than what we've got right now.
So, how do you get those bills, whether it's a state or federal? How do you get that information into your system so that it's for me in North Dakota or someone in Florida for my particular representative or senator? How does that get into the system?
Yeah, we
And then
we have to.
how does that get reported back? Does it get reported back to the member of Congress?
Right. So we start by having to scrape the bills from the legislature's websites. We have a good partner named Open States who does a lot of the heavy lifting of pulling in legislation continuously every day to try to get updates about where is a bill in the process. Was it just drafted, or did it get a committee assignment, or did it go to is there an actual motion to carry it to the floor, et cetera? And then we go and we have to classify these bills based on which ones look like they've got momentum, and which ones are going to be moving, and which ones are dead on arrival. Right. So there's that, and then we load the bills into the app. We actually we do run them through AI now to read and summarize the bills quickly and turn them from complex and esoteric legal language into just human speech, so that people can understand what the bill does, what's the impact to my community or to different groups of people. And, if I vote yes, what does that mean? If I vote no, what does that mean? So all of these things that can help a person make a decision. We also go out and scrape from the internet any organizations that have taken a position on that bill. And if they've got, if they've got a public statement saying, the League of Women Voters supports this, or the Sierra Club is opposed to that, we try to pull that in and attach that to the bill so that voters have as much information as they can, so that when they go to make their decision, they've got the full bill text if they want to read it, but they've also got summaries and they've also got these extra sources to try to help them make a good decision.
Nice. And have you had feedback from legislators saying, "Oh, I've looked at this," or "Really, I trust this," or
Yes, we've had both positive and negative. We've had a bipartisan appropriation sponsored by senior Republican in the Florida legislature in the Senate and a junior Democrat in the Florida House, who worked together to get a budget appropriation on our behalf and pushed it all the way into the Florida state budget. And then Ron DeSantis line item vetoed it. So,
Mhm.
there's going to be, and this is not a party thing. I've been thrown out of the offices of both Democrats and Republicans alike. There's going to be there's going to be a difference in mindset that legislators have. Some of them have the mindset that I was elected based on my judgment to make decisions on behalf of my community. I don't need this as a tool.
Mhm.
Then there are other legislators who say, what I would call more servant leaders, who say, no, I am here as a proxy of the people who sent me here. And I want to always know what they need so I can reflect that in my vote. And those types of folks actually exist in both parties. And the first type of folks, which is, I'm really smart, I know best, those
Mhm.
also exist in both parties. And we believe that, the legislators who supported us, you can go to our website and go to the supporters page. You can see a list of legislators who've endorsed our project. Either most of them were in Florida because that's where we started this, but
Right.
legislators who are sitting legislators who've endorsed our projects, or a bunch of candidates running for office who are promising that if they get elected to office, they will be a true voice of the people using this technology. So there's actually a gentleman running for Congress in the Florida 11th district named Dan Williams, who's running on a direct democracy platform. So he's a professor at a university in Central Florida. He had this idea. He's like, I want to do a direct democracy. He went and found our project and said, oh, wow, these guys have built a lot of the infrastructure already. I don't have to build it myself. And so he ran for office. And so he's actively, his election's coming up in 2 weeks. We're going to find out what the voters think. That's a primary. He's running as
Mhm.
a Democrat. So we have to find out, do Democratic primary voters believe in direct democracy? Because,
Huh.
that's tough. That's a tough sell, because primary voters are hardcore ideologues. They don't necessarily
Mhm.
want to hear from everybody.
Right.
they want
Right.
they want to push their own opinions, right? So that we're going to find out from voters August 18th if that's a real winning message. But you can see on our supporters page that there are a lot of legislators who believe in the vision. But there were legislators who obviously got to Governor DeSantis and said, "You need to kill this thing because maybe makes me look bad." Some of
Mhm.
those scorecards paint people in a negative light who didn't really appreciate that. So
Yeah.
it's a mixed bag.
Yeah. Uh, Again, maybe going along that lines, you had mentioned that you're proving these are real people. These aren't bots. As we know, AI is everywhere, and there's good and there's bad. Um, how does your system go into there to verify that it is a real person?
Right. So we do it on the front end because this is real election software that's been state ramp certified in several states as well as Canada and Mexico. It was actually used in the Mexico national election. So all Mexican citizens who were outside the country had the right to vote by phone in their last big national election. Interestingly, Mexico has an independent elections commission. It's not run by politicians,
Huh.
which is one of the key reasons they can be innovative in that way, I believe.
Sure.
So on the front end, voters have to verify with a photo ID that matches their face and it matches the information on the voter file. And if it does that automatically, and if it can't, people move, they don't update their registration. That stuff happens.
Mhm.
Um, if it doesn't, if it's not able to do it automatically, it goes into a pending queue and a human will review it manually. But most of the DMVs now are actually pretty good at updating people's voter registration when they update to driver's license. So it uses that process same as an election, and then it is a blockchain backend. So voters have a vote token that is a cryptographic token that is kept on the device. and can be used to cast a vote on in a real election so that it can only be done once. And so that it gets added to the blockchain and there's no way to manipulate that. A blockchain is a permanent distributed ledger. There are multiple copies of it that are kept by independent auditing companies, as well as some of the state supervisors' offices, and at this point, some of the election commissions in other countries now, too. So they all kind of have copies of the blockchain that they can use to make sure there's no manipulation. And
Hmm.
that's how you guarantee that a vote that's cast is a vote that's counted. But it also uses a system called homomorphic encryption, which is a process where a piece of data can be encrypted, but you can still run mathematical calculations against it. So, for example, if you wanted to add 2 plus 2, but both twos are encrypted under typical encryption, you wouldn't be able to know that that's a two and that's a two. You couldn't do anything with that. You can't
Hmm.
add them together. Homomorphic encryption lets you perform mathematical calculations by adding 2 plus 2, even though they're still encrypted. They don't have to be decrypted for that. That's really key to protecting the secret ballot. One of the
Yeah.
reasons that mobile voting or online voting is so challenging is that you have to do two basically competing things. One is you have to guarantee the voter's identity and that they have the right to vote in that election. And two is you have to guarantee their secret ballot. So if you think about how a bank does it, they guarantee
Hmm.
your identity with the same process of making you scan a photo ID and matching a selfie scan. You've probably seen that all over the place now. But they can, they track that identity against every transaction you make. Whereas with mobile voting, you have to guarantee that nobody can see that Brian voted yes and Ramon voted no. And that's
Hmm.
why the encryption layer is so important there to make this kind of thing possible.
So, do you find yourself explaining the technology almost more than the Digital Democracy Project to allay some of those fears?
I think you have to because there's so much skepticism of anything online right now,
Hmm.
and especially things like online voting. Because I mean, Elon Musk is always running these Twitter polls, but the how many of that is bots, right? I mean,
Hmm.
how many of these even real accounts? So if there's no system of identity verification, you can't trust the results. So you really have to do a lot of work on the front end to verify that these are real human beings, they're verified voters, and they live in that district. And we match them against the voter file, which we get from the states. So it's an authoritative source. Without all of that, you really can't trust the data that comes out of the back end. You can't go to a legislator and truthfully say these are actually people in your district without all of that sophistication.
Yeah. How how are you measuring success with your program with voters? How many are using it in Florida, and what do you consider success?
Yeah. So in my mind, success is basically the number of people we've managed to get verified into the system and how are they voting. And we've verified about 24,000 voters so far in our process. They've cast about 120, 125,000 advisory votes on something like 900 or so bills so far. Um, so that to me is exciting when you see numbers like that. Now, granted, if you look at a specific bill, you might only see that a few hundred people engaged on that one bill because 24,000 people get into the app, but they don't have to vote on everything. And most people are
Hmm.
not going to. They're typically going to vote on the things that they care about. They're going to say, oh, I care a lot about taxes, or I care a lot about abortion, or I care a lot about the cost of pharmaceuticals, or whatever the topic is, right? So they can research that on our website and then they can decide what they want to vote on. But we don't expect everybody to vote on everything. Some people do. Some
Uh-huh.
people are very proud of being super voters and vote on every single thing.
Uh-huh.
Um, but that's not our expectation. So what we think we need to do to get real um, potency in the results is we really need millions of voters in all 50 states engaging like this so that on any given bill, you've got tens of thousands of people in a given district, who have told their legislator, I agree. I think you should vote yes on
Oh,
the Iran war powers resolution, for example, or I think you should vote no on this budget change.
okay. Ramon and I are just joking because we got cut off, so there might be a hard stop on that last question, but that's okay. We're not thinking it's a conspiracy, but who knows? Um, we won't go down that road. Um, so again, looking at whether or not it's effective, explaining technology and so forth. Do you feel Floridians are accepting of this and that it is Are you receiving really good feedback from them?
I think that voters give us very good feedback. I think that the real challenge is that voters, when we get negative feedback, it's usually in the effect that, well, what's the point? They don't listen to me anyway,
Hmm.
right? I think that's, you're always going to have this chicken and egg challenge. I think that's why it's important that we do actively try to talk to legislators and get them on board with this, because you need the legislators to come on board so that the voters will come on board, right? Yeah, they have to. It's a yin and yang there. Otherwise, the voters don't. They're like, why should I read through all these bills, spend my time and energy educating myself on these to form an opinion when they're just going to toss it in the trash like they always do?
Hmm.
And that's a legitimate concern. But what you got to do is, again, we need to get to scale. We need voters in mass to put pressure on legislators to make this the expectation that they will listen and that they will be held accountable. And if they're not, their accountability scores start to drop because they're not voting the way their district wants. And eventually some challenger comes along and says, well, shoot, I can do better than the 50%, you know,
Hmm.
elect me because that guy sucks. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's where you get real changes over a couple of election cycles. And now we're starting to see this. We're starting to see candidates using the incumbent scorecard, if they have a poor scorecard, and
Hmm.
saying, well, look at this guy. I'm like, he barely ever votes with the district on this. Give me a chance and I will definitely have a better score than this. That's where we want to see real change. It's the
Hmm.
numbers and the data have power when people really um, do this as a community group. And that's also the reason why we establish ourselves as a nonprofit, and we have board members of all political persuasions so that there's no concern about, that we would put our thumb on the scales or support some one party over another or whatever. Our goal is to provide a platform, and voters get to use that platform for their own empowerment. Right? That's what
Hmm.
we're after here. We're
Yeah.
not creating a software product. We're creating a better vision of government so that the next 250 years in this experiment can become um, an even greater reflection of our basic premise is of a nation that's meant to be of, by, and for the people.
Yeah. I'm also thinking, in today's world, as we know, Americans are just absolutely kind of overwhelmed by an information overload.
Mhm.
So, what advice does your organization give to people who want to become better informed citizens, but also don't want to drown? Because, as an example, here in North Dakota, our legislature also meets for 80 days every 2 years, and in our last legislative session, there was over 1,000 bills for 80 days. So, how do we encourage or coach, maybe not coach is the wrong word, tell citizens, okay, get involved, but try not to drown.
Right. And I think that's a great question. Part where I think AI is incredibly powerful here is for doing some of that work is
Mhm.
um, read this bill for me and explain the impact. So because it's not reasonable that people are going to go through 1,000 bills, 100 pages each, and read
Mhm.
every line. I mean, the legislators don't do that either. so
Mhm.
so it's not a reasonable expectation. So part of it is the process of triaging the bills to focus on the ones that are actually going to come up for a vote. That's one. And
Mhm.
then two is the process of rapidly summarizing the bills and making sure that the AI is good. By the way, like we do keep a human in the loop in that process too, to make sure there's no hallucinations or kind of craziness or any key points that get missed or sort of glossed over. So
Mhm.
that's a key part of it as well. So we have to provide the best quality information we can provide about what's going to get a vote. So it's likely to become law, or at least become, it's part of the debate, and what's the impact on me and what's the impact on my community, so that we can actually cut through a lot of the noise and go straight to the core of the question for people, so that they can just say, well, here's the other key thing, Brian, I think, is that so much of the noise comes from the enragement for engagement strategy of all the social media companies and all the bias in the traditional media. And I mean, even the headlines on my phone, I had to mute them because every headline is designed to either piss me off or
Oh,
um, make me click. Every headline on my phone seems like it's designed to make me mad, right? And so I think people are naturally wanting to check out because they cannot be enraged every day for a decade. I mean, we're kind of,
Yeah.
people are spent, you know? So we got to take, part of it is just um, going straight to the black and white of the text and saying, regardless of which political party or which politician wrote this or sponsored it or any of that background noise, having read what the bill does, do you think it's a good idea or not? Okay. Take off your red and blue tribe for a minute and just focus on the facts of the legislation. And do you think it's a good idea? That's what we're trying to get back to. And giving people the mechanism to have a reasonable, informed debate about policy that gets rid of all the character assassination and all the, our side, their side BS that is kind of baked into our process right now. Because again, we have a two-party system. So we're sort of, everybody gets thrown into these in believing that everything has a left or right leaning, when for most people, that's just not the way they think about the world. They can hold completely different ideological perspectives in their mind at the same time. And that's totally reasonable based on their lived experiences and how, what they want for themselves and their communities and their children and everything. So that's what we're trying to get back to really to simplify in a world that feels very noisy.
Yeah. So let's say that we've got a lot of people listening, and they say, Ramon, this sounds awesome. What's the next step for the listener?
Well, again, we're a nonprofit organization. We need listeners to help us in a variety of ways. The most direct is download the app and vote. Go to digitaldemocracyproject.org and click the links to install the app and get verified. We just need you to participate so we can get real community numbers. But of course, we also need volunteers. We need anybody who's got coding experience, who wants to help us build the product, organizing experience, who can help reach out to organizations, that their community groups, their different nonprofits, maybe they already participate with, spread the word, get people using the app and the website. Volunteers who track legislation in a state capitol. That's incredibly helpful to us because we're constantly having to figure out what's moving in the state capitol, and every state is different. They've all got their weird nuances about how they do business. So, and of course we need donations, right? We're an all volunteer team. So our biggest costs are basically servers and software licenses and AI tokens and those types of things that make the product work. So we need all of those things. This is a truly grassroots community-based effort. And it is going to be up to all of us to decide what form of democracy we want to leave for our children and our grandchildren.
Okay. So last question, 5 years, 10 years down the road, what's your ultimate hope with what the work you're doing now?
When I like to dream big, I say this as a combat veteran, I would like to believe that the next time this country goes to war, everybody gets a vote.
All right. Yeah, that is huge. I've got a sibling who served at one point, and I think you'd probably echo those sentiments. So,
yeah.
So, Ramon, I just want to thank you again for taking time. Thank you very much for your service. Before I forget that, but I want to thank you for sharing those insights. Helping us better understand the Digital Democracy Project, which again, listeners can go to at digitaldemocracyproject.org. If you enjoyed the conversation, subscribe, leave a review here. Share the episode with someone who cares about building a stronger community and healthier democracy. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and remember that good government really begins with informed citizens, and this is a great way to do that. Thank you, Ramon.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for having us on.
Yeah.